Yesterday, probably the most extended time of the podium for Jalen Gramstad.
Yeah.
Not very often you get the backup quarterback that gets time to himself, but it's a great story. And I said going into the break, and all I could think about listening to him talk yesterday, and you can tell he's excited to be at Nebraska, stayed at Nebraska. He wanted to be a Husker. That's Easton Stick, who I wanted. So from this standpoint, so when Easton Stick was playing at Prep and Nebraska was kind of in and out and recruiting him, and he ended up at North Dakota State, and it ended up working out for Easton Stick. But I've always thought in a quarterback room in college where you get the number one guy, and there's probably going to be a pretty good separation between number one and number two.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a Jalen Gramstad, somebody who is talented, but probably not as talented as the number one, but has a skill set, also is happy to help the team out. And if they're not playing, they are not a disruption, and they make everyone around them better. They also are not afraid to just remind people that they're still in the quarterback room, but they're in it for the brand, and they add to the depth, and you never know what happens. You know, they could be called into service. I think everybody needs a Jalen Gramstad in their life. The one thing, though, as they were talking quarterbacks yesterday, is do you trust him enough that you would feel comfortable to go win a football game if 15 went down? I'm a nerd. I'm very curious about the backup quarterback race between now and August 30th because Nebraska played with the football gods, and 15 started every game for the first time since Tanner Lee did in 17. I'm not crazy enough to think that that is not going to happen again, that there's going to be one game where Dylan's going to get dinged or he can't go. And so here we go. The backup quarterback could be the difference between winning 8, winning 9. But at the end of the day, how much trust do they have to go win a football game if Dylan goes down with whoever the backup is?
What I like about Jalen Gramstad is he's, you watch that press conference and what he says about Nebraska and being there. He's very thankful, right? He's very happy. Like he is happy to be a Husker. He does not take his role or the opportunity for granted at all. But he still knows, and he still talks like, hey, I did some pretty damn good things at Northwestern College. Like I won a national championship. I was runner-up in my last year in the national championship before I came here to Nebraska. I impressed this Nebraska coaching staff enough in a summer camp to be asked to be on this football team. I understand that, hey, Dylan's the guy and he's a lot more talented and he's the 5-star, but I'm still me. I'm still here. I'm happy to be here, but I still am who I am. And I think the other part of it too is when you got a guy like Dylan Raiola who's been told his entire life, and this isn't a knock on Dylan, this is just the truth, that he is the best and he's always been the best and he's always been super talented and he's always been, put on a pedestal. I think it's great to have a guy like Jalen Gramstad who hasn't experienced any of that in his life, who, had to work for all, and I'm not saying that Dylan didn't have to work, but Gramstad wasn't born or wasn't blessed with those gifts that Dylan has, and so had to grind his way to the point where he is. I think it's good that you have that contrast between those two quarterbacks, and it's even better that Dylan embraces him, that Dylan likes him, that Dylan tells him, hey, I want you to be here. Hey, I need you. And that was a big thing that they talked about, where he was a little unsure of whether or not he was going to come back for another year, and talked about the impact that Dylan saying, hey, dude, no, I need you to be here. The fact that he has those experiences and it contrasts with Dylan, and Dylan, for how young he is, has that kind of fortitude in his head to know that, no, your experiences are going to help me, is very mature. And I think a great sign. The thing, though, is that, and this is the God's honest truth when it comes to Jalen Gramstad playing football at Nebraska, you're not going to know until he steps out onto the field. And there's nothing against him, right? I prefer we don't see that day, because you want your starting quarterback to play every single game. But I think the fact that they trust him, the fact that he's seen the ball go through the hoop in terms of having success at a higher level than high school is important. And I like how he carries himself. So I'm not I'm not being like, oh, I'm a Jalen Gramstad guy and he's a dude who can come in and make an impact or anything. I just don't think we'll know until it happens. I just hope it doesn't happen.
I think there's real competition in that room.
I don't think so.
See, I think Dylan had no respect for Harburg last year in terms of, this is a competition. It's my job. And there's probably a little bit of that hurt his development of, every day.
Not
every
being
day,
pushed or
every-
not
every
having
day-
that, hey, I got to
yeah,
get out there.
Every day
Yeah.
you have to go to work. Now, I think there's a gap between the 1 and the 2. But
big time.
Speaking of 2, yesterday, just listening to Glenn Thomas talk, and what has been already talked about in the spring and what we already know is they have a 2-year window with Dylan. They have a 2-year window because they got to figure out the quarterback room post Dylan Raiola. I mean, his brother is coming.
Mm-hmm.
They're already hot on the trail of one of the top quarterbacks in 27.
Trey Taylor, yeah.
2 years from now. So that would be, ideally, Dylan's got 2 years. And let's be honest, maybe in the portal world, you're year to year with Dylan Raiola.
I think you're year to year with every player in the portal world.
But the quarterback position being the most important.
Sure, yes.
Is you have to figure out, you got 2 years to figure out your quarterback room. So if Dylan gets to where you think he can be, and I think he can be, you don't want to drop off when he leaves early to go to the NFL. So you don't miss a beat. And it's important, I think, in the next 2 years to not only develop either a Davila or a TJ Lateef, because I don't think both of them are going to stay. 2 years from now, they're both not going to be here. Okay, it'll be one. So this is an important year for both of those guys. One has a year ahead of the other one, in coming from Purdue, even though he didn't play, that's their competition. Like there's a competition within a competition, in my opinion, in the quarterback room, but they got 2 years to figure it out so that when they hand off the baton, they keep at a level at that position. So I do like they have been very aggressive in recruiting like the 27 class.
Yeah.
I think they should take more than Dayton Raiola in 26, but they may go high school portal guy, and that may be the plan. But they have a 2-year window at that position to maximize success, but then also to set it up for future success.
I think that there is definitely a buffer in between the second quarterback and the third quarterback. I think you're completely right in the regard that there's 1 and 2, and then there's 1 and 2, right? There is, hey, here's Dylan, here's Jalen, that's the starter, that's the backup. And then, that's why they talk about Jalen as the backup and they talk very highly of him and they trust him in that position. And then they know that, hey, because
do you think it's so? I think he's the only guy that has already gone through it. So they have a sample size.
But I do think that there is a bit of a we want to focus on developing Davila and focusing on developing TJ Lateef, right? Because that is a really tough position to put any sort of inexperienced quarterback in to, hey, you got to get better. And these are the things that you have to develop on to be the guy that we think you can be. But you're also one injury away from stepping onto the field, right? It's hard to tell a guy, hey, you're not good at this and you're not good at this and you need to do these things to get better and this isn't going to fly when you're the dude. And then all of a sudden, like literally a play later, you're like, well, you got to go out there and you got to play a high level, Division I football. Like, go ahead. There you go. It's hard. It's a really tough position to put young guys like that in. So I do think there is that benefit of having a guy like Jalen Gramscott who's played a lot of football to be right there and then, focus more so on, hey, you got to do your things to get better, to take the baton.
I think it would be a great development if Gramstad was not your backup quarterback on August 30th.
I do so too.
That would mean, because Gramstad is a good quarterback and we know what he has, but that would mean that either a portal quarterback or a true freshman, probably more portal quarterback, would have done enough to beat out a guy that you like as your security blanket for Dylan. That'd be the best case scenario in the quarterback room, in my opinion.
I think the position that they're in right now with what they have is totally adequate. It is totally fine to have your 5-star quarterback, a guy that has played at a lower level, who's done a lot of football, who you trust, and then to have your 2 other dudes who you hope are going to become something at the same time. Yeah, if one of those guys just takes in stride what they're teaching them and goes to lengths and then like improves to points where you didn't think they could go previous to that, that absolutely is the ideal situation.
These guys, we know what we need to know about Dylan, but the spring game, not having a true spring game, is the disappointment for the backup quarterbacks. To see Gramstad perform, like basically have a battle for the 2 and 3 spot in the middle of a game before 70.
And I do think the spring game, you could say, well, they have scrimmages and they have practices, but the spring game brought something that the practices didn't, and that was a crowd, and that was like an actual reaction, and that was like actual pressure. And the fact that, if you perform well in a spring game, people are going to write about you people are going to critique you. People are going to really look down deep into what you're doing. Like, you can't get that in practices.
First major scrimmage tomorrow. Is that right?
I believe so, based on what it was the last couple of years, and you'll have Rule talk right after. So I think
he'll
that's
have
the
some
case.
news as well when he talks. All right, 2 to go. Hour number 3 is coming up next. We'll do why is it upside down? Boy, why you got Uncrustable wrappers? You got it's on
mine.
The floor.
That's not mine.
Well, you got to respect the big board. It's on the floor.
Well, I don't want you to see it.
Okay.
What is this,
all right.
Christmas?
We'll unveil it when we we'll unveil the big board.
Oh, you can get an easel
when we come. Yeah.
I didn't buy one, but I've been taking some big pieces of paper from somewhere and then using it to write the big board.
We'll see the big board coming up next.